Earthlings. How you doing? Welcome to First Contact Radio. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. Great super moon, huh? Did you get out and have a chance to look at it? It was pretty large last night as well. Quite spectacular, the brightness of it. It said it was 14% larger and 30% brighter than normal because it was at the close position to the Earth. So, very cool. All right, let's check out our cosmic weather. Starting over at space weather, our solar wind is at 318.5 kilometers per second. Planetary K index is up to a 2, which is quiet. Expected to be no higher than that within the next 24 hours. Planetary K index, coronal holes. You see we've got something going on here. And this is quite a large one. Remember, we had the big triangle under there. So, there's some kind of big something or another underneath here. And this, keep in mind, that's huge. This is, I don't know how many Earths it is, but these are many, many, many Earths that are able to fit into that space. Pretty large. Indeed, pretty impressive. Alright, we do have a new sunspot I'll tell you about in a moment, and that's why the chance of flares, M-class flares, is up to 70% chance, and the activity geomagnetic storm-wise is kind of low, 10 to 15%. Nothing much, but let's go and look at this sunspot. Alright, it says one of the largest sunspot groups in years rotated over the sun's northeastern limb this weekend. With at least 4 dark cores larger than the Earth, AR 1476 sprawls more than 100,000 kilometers from end to end and makes an easy target from backyard solar telescopes. Amateur astronomer Alan Friedman sends a picture of the behemoth from his backyard in Buffalo, New York. Alright, so we'll keep an eye on that because these are the kind of things that are going to produce flares. However, they're not expected to predict more than a M-class flare at this point in time. Alright. Astrologically, we are still in the same sun sign. The sun sign deals with the conscious mind. Currently, we are at Taurus. Taurus, the bull. Taurus is an earth sign. Therefore, the conscious mind issues we're dealing with are earthly natures, things of a practical nature. In tarot cards, the Taurus is the Hierophant, which is the inner teacher. So the idea there is about listening. Not getting so caught up in the practical world that you think that that's the be-all end-all existence of everything, but listening to the inner teacher so that you can operate more practically in the physical world. So it's learning how to work together. That's the conscious mind in Earth, and the unconscious mind today, right over here, we're in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign. Sagittarius deals with philosophy, higher education. In the tarot cards, it's the card of the Temperance, which is the higher self. It's all about balancing out the false and preconceived ideas of life with truth. So we've got fire and earth. Okay, fire and earth. That's what we're dealing with today. Think of how fire and earth work together. There's a lot of different ways. The fire can certainly dry out the earth, make it crusty, or it can create a nice warmth that will allow the earth to be moldable into different shapes. So if you were creating something, you might use the fire to be able to create your shape a little bit better. So fire and earth work very well together. So those are the two elements we're working with for today. Now, from the moon, we're already on our way down again, 97% of the way full from what it was this weekend. Our Mayan Oracle, we're on a 5-tone day, signified by the 5th position here on the wave spell. The 5-tone day for today, right in the middle here, we go to our daykin, is the storm. So today is called an overtone, 5, storm, overtone storm. You read it by the bar on top or the tone on top. and the one in the middle, and then the guide here. So today is a 5 storm guided by the hand. And since the 5 is called the overtone, it's the overtone storm guided by the hand. The supporting cast members around it. The like-minded energy is the sun. Challenging energy is the moon, and the wind beneath it is the hidden power, the occult. All right, altogether our phrase, I empower in order to catalyze commanding energy. I seal the matrix of self-generation with the overtone tone of radiance. I am guided by the power of accomplishment, and today is a galactic activation portal day. What that means is that the energies of this row and this column are coinciding here in this square, because you've got the second row over, second position over right here, so that empowers this a bit more. That's why it's a galactic activation portal, which means the energies are even more intensified in those squares. And you can see, if you look at some of the other calendar systems here, we got the Mayan Zolkin today would be a 10 ebb, and on the Hob a 15 woe. Alright, on the Gregorian calendar today is Monday, May 7th, 2012. So that catches you up with our cosmic weather. Good energy, good vibe moving forward. We got the full moon energy behind us, and we're just charging straight ahead. It's good to see there weren't any significant earthquakes. Sometimes with the large moons like that, there are those kind of activities, but nothing of really any nature over the course of the weekend. A couple of 5s, and those are significant in and of themselves, depending on where they are, but at least there wasn't anything of a big 7 or 8 magnitude kind of nature. Alright, the first thing I'm going to play for you today here, this is a piece. It is about King Tut's racial origins. This is part of an interview. It was a clip from Jeff Rense. It was a good interview, so I want to play part of this clip for you here this morning. You can listen to the full thing on his show, and here we go.
African people, but we are trying to be as factual as we can be. If they were in fact the originators of the scintillating empire and civilization of the Nile, how come in Africa they never have then duplicated it and built another civilization, or even a quarter of it or a third of it, to show that Africans could have built a civilization, comparable to the Nile? If that hasn't happened, how dare the Smithsonian and other groups come and tell us that it was people out there that made it? It's a completely hideous travesty of the truth. But they will literally pull out any, chimera to hand you, because they'll do anything to cover up the connections between the East and the West and the true story of these migrations and what the old Irish annals that I read mention. They will do anything to have you go and read them.
Our history, as we are taught it, as it is brought down generation through generation here in the West, is I guess it's still being tweaked and corrupted, every 20, 30 years, or even more often than that. A sentence here, an inflection there, in the printed text, so to speak, and you've got a different view. I mean, it must be amazing to go back and do what you do to find out what really happened. It must be also very discouraging at times.
Re-explore the whole question of Egypt and the whole question of the movement of the races, and how did that pyramid get there? How did the civilization, how did it actually get started, and who was the people who started it? And then we have all of the other lie mechanisms, of course, which you have to negotiate and plow through. There's a whole cult since the 1970s, funded by the United Nations, of the Afrocentrists, who tried to convince the world, and have done a pretty good job doing that, of that, it was the Africans who created the Nile civilizations, and there's no real hard evidence for that, but yet that was picked up by the media and by the Smithsonian and the National Geographic and all of these other orgs, which are highly suspect, and they push this for all they're worth, and it's not sustainable. But at the same time, you're stuck with having to then rebut it, and these latest discoveries do rebut it. Even the discoveries of Sigmund Freud at the turn of the century rebutted it. But, they don't care. The establishment doesn't care what facts are. They're going to hit you with whatever media spin that turns the whole of reality upside down. And my job then started in the 90s, start focusing on this level of disinformation, and through deconstructing the disinformation, plowing through the welter of lies that have been disseminated about Egypt, about Ireland, about the age of catastrophe, and about so many other things in this life.
What we commonly know and understand about Giza and Egypt and Egyptian civilization is, I hate to use the term, but it's essentially a lie.
Yeah.
What other word would you use? It's a lie, and there are people promulgating this lie who know damn well that it's not true. But they've got money, they've got ego invested. It's a big tourism industry, and we don't want to slight the black races of Africa, but unfortunately, the DNA is not to be argued with. He's not of African heritage. It's clear he's of European ancestry, and it's clear that this man is Northern European. Most people would think, well, we'll see another Barack Obama or something like that. No. And Obama trying to claim ancient Egyptian heritage amuses me to no end. I forget which pharaoh he claims to look exactly like, but it all gets to be out of hand.
Yeah, he was claiming to look like Amenhotep IV, who's better known as Akhenaten. That's considered to be, that's Tutankhamun's father. So, that could change, but the consensus is that Akhenaten was Tutankhamun's father, and Nefertiti was the mother of Tutankhamun. There's other scholars, of course, have different takes on this, but that is the general idea until new evidence comes forth to change that. And Nefertiti is a very important character because she has been the one, in fact, of that particular dynasty, that particular family, that many scholars through the hundreds of years have suspected was of Western ancestry. So to find out now through the most up-to-date science, DNA science, that in fact her son is directly, non-negotiably of Western ancestry is a huge vindication. The gods Ra, the god Osiris, the god Horus, all are later descendants of Nordic and British or Irish, if you're using the pure sense. I don't just mean Ireland when I say Ireland. I mean the Druids, the Arya, the High Arya who had colleges throughout the world. Well, those colleges, as the Irish annals and the ancient legends of Ireland confirm, were all over the world, right down into Egypt. But the legends have always been taken for legends, and the myths have always been taken for myths. Why? Because those are talismanic words. You put the word legend on something and people dismiss it. This is much more deep than just finding cocaine in the tombs of the mummies or pictures of elephants in South America and parrot feathers in Egypt and all of this other stuff that's come up anecdotally over the years. This is absolute vindication for those people who said, no, it's not just that these people visited or being thrown out, like you asked earlier, moved westward in a vain attempt to find a new home. No, this shows that their origin originally, not visitation, but their ancestry came from the West in a direct west to east movement. That blows the whole thing wide open. I'm glad you put the pictures up because, remember, Zahi Hawass adamantly refused to release this information when it came out. It's not official. This was leaked by people on the team and from behind the scenes silently. The head men adamantly said, it's in the report, I have it. It says, I will not release it. They were so frightened of what this means for the Afrocentrists and all of the other bogus stuff that's come out from the universities and what the people will realize when they find that this there's no merit in it. So there's a complete clamp down.
Yeah,
those
I got it.
That you're putting up in the article is completely leaked.
Wow.
What does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells me time.
And don't forget that there's an entire tie-in here to the Bible through what is known as the Hyksos people, who have been this group dynasty in Egypt has always had a question mark over it as to who they were and, more importantly, where they came from. And the great scholar Ralph Ellis has proven, he was not the first one, there's been many at the turn of the century, like Sigmund Freud.
This is the UFO News with Joshua Poet.
All right, Dirk. Thank you very much. This is the UFO News for today, and I have 5 stories. All right, first story comes to us from New York City. And this was on 5/12. Let's check it out. Alright. And that was it. Quick thing going by there. Now the question is, what is that? Is that real or is that fake? I'm going to leave that for you there for you to decide. It is that's an interesting looking one. Interesting looking one indeed. But let's just all look at it and see what we think. Alright, next one here. This comes to us from Rome. Alright, let's see what we have here. Alright, Zeta Reticuli 2010. Fast forward here. Alright, what we got there? There we go. We got the orb-like object. We've seen, so many times. It's above Rome, Italy. Doesn't do anything more spectacular than that. Alright. So the video is available for you to check it out, see what you think. Next story here comes to us from Russia, Moscow. This was on the 6th of May. From user Olgin77 about the UFO phenomena over Moscow, capital and the most important city of Russia. Alright. This was on May 6th, just the other day. Alright, we see a grouping there. 2, 3, that kind of a triangle, something. Yeah, there's a third one right there. It looks like very faint. Maybe just 2. Alright, so very interesting. More close up there. It's like little fireballs just floating there in the sky. Alright, that's Moscow. Moving on here, this story is Jaime Maussan predicts catastrophic event will happen on May 20th, 2012. That's not too far from where we are, 13 days away. This video was originally published in 2008, but it seems to be getting a lot of attention these days. In this video, Jaime Maussan predicts the end of the world, or at least the start of something terrible on May 20th, 2012. We have all seen religious fanatics, extreme groups, and others predict a whole host of catastrophic events, including the end of the world. Needless to say, we are still around. Jaime Maussan is a fairly well-respected TV host in Mexico, but we all know in his business, ratings are king. The more outrageous the story, the bigger the headline, the more viewers, which translate to more money and job security. I do not put much stock in these predictions, but I post it as an FYI. Alright, well, let's find out what went on, because Jaime is quite respected in the community, and I don't think he would probably just randomly or lightly throw some information out like this, so let's give a listen.
Now let me explain you this. I can use both, but I have to use one. Okay, here is this half circle is the number, the day 0. The day zero is when the Pleiades, the Sun, and the Earth are joined together. And that's the 20th of May. Here in the middle, we have an eclipse, an annular eclipse, a partial eclipse of the Sun. And this is going to happen exactly the 20th of May, 2012. And then we have the number 16 in here. 16 days later, after the eclipse, is going to be the transit of Venus in front of the Sun. Now we have 4 times 13. 4 times 13 is 52. 52 is the new fire. Every 52 years, the sacred calendar and the solar calendar go to the same day, to the same start. That means that this is related to the new fire, the new eras that they celebrate every 52 years. And also we have here the number 20, and there were 13 months of 20 days in the Sulking. All this proves that this is the Sulking calendar. And we have these dates, the 20th of May, and we have also the 6th of June. We have 2 weeks. I don't know what it means, but we have to remember, and again, as I said, this is more or less saying it's going to be the return of Quetzalcoatl, of Kukulkan, of the Messiah. Something important. I don't know if it's related because both of them are so close together. Both of them appear. And this is the eclipse of May the 20th, 2012. It's going to be seen here, United States and Mexico too. Also in half of the world.
All right, very interesting. So we're going to pay attention to what's going on around the 20th and see what more information comes out about that. The story and the links available. FirstContactRadio.com, right-hand side, UFO News. That way you can follow the link and continue the research on your own. Because, hey, don't take my word for things. You know, always double-check. We all want to think for ourselves out there. All right? All right, last story here. Triangular UFO reported in Texas in cloud or mist. An Ellis County, Texas witness reports watching a black boomerang-shaped object with a mist or a shadow all around it as it flies across the night sky towards the north, according to a May 4th, 2012 testimony from Mutual UFO Witness Reporting Database. The witness was in the backyard watching the night sky when the object was first observed. Most of the object structure was visible as a black boomerang shape with about 4 to 5 light blue white lights along the bottom side of the wings, but there was something strange about it, the witness stated. The witness said there seemed to be a mist around the object. There appeared to be a mist or a shadow all around as it flew across the night sky towards the north. The object and its lights were visible, but the effect of the mist surrounding it made me blink and strain to focus at what I was seeing, even though the outline of the object was clear. The witness ran inside to alert his wife and retrieve a pair of binoculars, but upon returning outside, the object was gone. No images or videos are included with this report, which was filed on the 4th of May, 2012. These events were from the 21st of March. All right, that is our UFO news for today. Let's jump away. You know what time it is. Time for our wake-up song. Here we go.
What if our government was responsible for some of the greatest crimes against this nation? Would you really want to know? These are big questions, but these questions deserve answers. It's time to demand the truth.
People shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Government should be afraid.
9/11 was an inside job. Kennedy was killed by the CIA. Jimmy Carter saw UFO. Answers to secrets you need to know. So wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Patriots arise. It's time to demand the truth.
All right, continuing along. All right, our next stories are going to be about Dr. Paul, because since the mainstream media, including Fox, when I say mainstream, I refer to Fox as well. They're part of the mainstream. I know they've done a good job of convincing others they're cable television, they're not mainstream. You know what? Those are just all semantics. They're part of the mainstream media, but it's crazy because I talk to folks every day, and when I mention Fox and mainstream, they're like, Fox is not part of the mainstream. It's like, what do you mean? Of course they are. They're one of the main things that people are watching. Therefore, they are part of the mainstream. When you think about the main news channels people watch, Fox is one of the news that is rattled off. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Those are the ones people usually say. CBS, ABC. Mainstream. Anyway, since the mainstream is failing to give Ron Paul his due, I'm going to help pick up the slack here, along with all the alternative media, making sure you get your daily doses of Ron Paul. So this is his weekly update, and then we've got some late news from him as well. Here we go.
Hello, this is Ron Paul with your weekly update for May 6th. Last week, President Obama made a surprise pre-dawn trip to Afghanistan to mark the one-year anniversary of the killing of Osama bin Laden and to sign a document further extending the U.S. presence in that country. The president said, quote, "We're building an enduring partnership. As you stand up, you will not stand alone," close quote. What that means in practice is that the U.S. will continue its efforts to prop up the government in Afghanistan for another 10 years beyond the promised withdrawal date of 2014. To those of us who believe the U.S. should leave Afghanistan immediately, the president retorted, quote, "We must give Afghanistan the opportunity to stabilize," close quote. And how long will that take when we have already fought the longest war in our nation's history at incredible human and economic cost to the nation, and no end is in sight? There is little evidence of any sustained increase in stability in Afghanistan, and in fact, April saw the loss of 34 more American troops and an escalation of violence and upheaval. Within 90 minutes of the president's departure, 7 more people were killed in Kabul by a suicide bomber. It is clear that our presence in that country is not creating any real stability. With Osama bin Laden dead and the al-Qaeda presence in Afghanistan virtually non-existent, we are reduced to a nation building in a nation where there is no real nation to build. We should ask ourselves why Obama's trip was a surprise visit rather than a normal state visit. The reason is that after 10 years, it is far too dangerous to travel in or out of that country. Does that not speak much more loudly than the president's optimistic words about the amazing progress we have made in Afghanistan? What does our enduring commitment mean? Ask the South Koreans, where the United States has maintained an enduring commitment of U.S. troops more than 50 years after hostilities ended. By some estimates, the United States taxpayer is saddled with a $40 billion annual price tag for our enduring commitment to maintaining a U.S. presence in Korea. Polls suggest that particularly younger Koreans are tired of the U.S. military presence in their country and would prefer us to leave. The same is true for the residents of Okinawa, who have argued strongly and with some recent success for American troops to leave their island. The Soviets believed the road to their goal for a universal form of government ran through Afghanistan. They were also wrong and paid an enormous price. However, after 9 years and 15,000 Soviet lives lost, the communist regime in Moscow realized its mistake and withdrew from that country. The Soviet withdrawal was complete in early 1989. The Soviet Union by that time had further plunged into economic crisis, fueled in great part by its commitment to maintain a global empire of client states. Later that year, the Soviet world began crashing down with the first collapse of Eastern Europe regimes, and then the Soviet Union itself. That collapse produced an economic calamity for the successor states from which most have not yet fully recovered. It is not too late for the United States to learn what the Soviets discovered too late, back in 1989. Mr. President, the time to leave Afghanistan is today, not in 2024. Thanks for calling this update. A new update is placed on this number, 888-322-1414 every Monday. The written text can be found on my website, www.house.gov/Paul, under the heading Texas Straight Talk. Thanks for calling.
So I guess we can chalk up another thing that Obama said he was going to do that he didn't do. It's not going to do. Obama. I like how they've changed the spelling. The mainstream has changed the spelling of Osama bin Laden because too many people were getting Obama and Osama confused. So they went ahead and they took the liberties of changing his name, spelling with a U, as opposed to the way it's spelled with an O. So, you know, now they can just respell someone's name. Is that how it works? So Obama, Osama, it's like the same dude almost. You know, nonsense. All right, moving right along here. As predicted, Ron Paul backers take over the Maine GOP convention. This is from Bon Maine Politics. Says here that Augusta, Maine, fervent supporters of Ron Paul assumed control of the Maine Republican Party convention on Saturday with hopes of using the new power to send a majority of delegates to represent Maine at the national convention. The narrow election late Saturday of Paul delegates as convention secretary and convention chairman allowed Paul supporters to shift the event away from the Maine GOP establishment. Maine Republican Party chairman Charlie Webster had predicted in an email last week to Republicans that Paul supporters would attempt to assert their authority at the convention, and that's exactly what happened. Takeover is a strong word. We're all registered Republicans here, said Matthew McDonald of Belfast, a Waldo County Republican and a Paul supporter. But Chairman Webster called Ron Paul supporters wingnuts. He saw us as a fringe minority. Now we hold the power of the convention. It was a major symbolic coup for Paul supporters and a bit of a letdown for Mitt Romney, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. Ironically, Romney's brother, Scott Romney, was scheduled to deliver the convention's keynote address on Saturday. All right, so good things happening there in Maine. But wait, there's more. Ron Paul backers quietly seek to overturn Mitt Romney's caucus victory in Idaho. This comes to us from the Idaho Statesman. Ron Paul supporters backed the state's GOP new presidential caucus system, but they're so disgusted with the third place finish. In fact, that Mitt Romney captured all 32 national delegates. They're working to change the result. I'll do the scorched earth if I have to, said Ryan Davidson, third vice chairman of the Ada County Republican Party and a Paul organizer. The Paul campaign plans to control the GOP state convention in June by winning the little-noticed precinct committee races across Idaho in the May 15th primary. The 2/13 of the delegates of the Idaho State Convention are Ron Paul supporters. They can vote to suspend the rules, overturn the results of the caucus, and award all the national delegates to Ron Paul. Davison said on YouTube, in recent days he shut down access to the tracking video because Romney supporters were using it to counterattack. All right, but wait, there's more. Ron Paul is going to the Republican National Convention, and believe it or not, it is still possible for Paul to score an upset win over Mitt Romney. Let's check this out. This is Reality Check. Here we go.
An email reached our newsroom today, and it included this statement. The RNC and Team Romney will start pushing new messaging ahead of the president's trip to Ohio on Saturday. Hype and blame 2012. Rather than getting into the hype and the blame issue, there's a bigger one here. How are the RNC and Team Romney teaming up while a Republican primary is underway? Ben has the reality check you won't see anywhere else.
Well, not only is the national media content with the idea that Mitt Romney is now the Republican nominee, Apparently so is the Republican National Committee. 2 weeks ago, the RNC chairman announced Governor Romney's strong performance and delegate count at this stage of the primary process has made him our party's presumptive nominee. In order to maximize our efforts, I have directed my staff at the RNC to open lines of communication with the Romney campaign. That may not sound too alarming to most people, and yet it is extremely problematic. Why is that? Because essentially the RNC chair is violating the rules of the Republican Party. Rule 11 of the Republican Party rules states that the Republican National Committee shall not, without the prior written and filed approval of all members of the Republican National Committee from the state involved, contribute money or in-kind aid to any candidate for any public or party office except the nominee of the Republican Party or a candidate who was unopposed in the Republican primary after the filing deadline for that office. And clearly, we are still in a primary. It's not up to the Republican leadership as to whether or not Romney is the only candidate in the race, because he is not. Congressman Ron Paul, of course, is still in the running in the primary. But since he is so far behind, does it even matter? Here's why it matters. I've been telling you for months now about the fight for delegates in the state conventions, where those unbound delegates are. But over the weekend, some stunning things took place in the Republican race. Keeping up with the delegate count is hard. In fact, there's a new website, thereal2012delegate.com. It lays it out pretty clearly. In Louisiana, get this, the district caucuses were held on Saturday. At the district level, 150 delegates move on to the state contest, where they will elect 46 delegates to go to the national convention. Louisiana has bound delegates. And yet, on Saturday, 111 of the 150 district delegates elected are Ron Paul supporters. Also on Saturday, Mitt Romney's home state of Massachusetts held its own congressional delegate caucus. They chose 19 delegates to go on to Tampa. But as the Daily Caller points out, 16 of those 19 are also Ron Paul delegates. The 16 delegates supporting Paul are bound to vote for Romney on the first ballot at the Republican National Convention. If Romney does not achieve the required number of votes on the first ballot, the delegates can vote for the candidate of their choice. Again, so writes the Daily Caller. And that was my understanding until I was directed to the Republican National Convention rules for 2008 and 2010. And shockingly, that may not be the case at all. Way down at the end of the RNC rules is rule number 38. That rule consists of only one sentence. No delegate or alternate delegate shall be bound by any attempt of any state or congressional district to impose the unit rule. So what is the unit rule? Well, that rule requires that all delegates from one state or congressional district are required or bound to vote as a unit. So what you need to know? If Rule 38 is applied, not only does Mitt Romney not currently have enough delegates to secure the nomination, which he doesn't at this point, but he and Rick Santorum may have actually both lost a combined 62 delegates since last weekend. And most importantly, if those bound delegates are not bound at all under the unit rule, since most states are just now getting around to those state conventions, then this primary contest really only just started. This could be a fight on the convention floor. And that is Reality Check.
If you'd like to make your voice heard on the story, head over to Ben's Facebook page. You can find it by searching Ben Swan, WXIX.
All right, so there's a little more dose of reality of what's really going on out there. Not quite what you're hearing, but Ron Paul's in the thick of it. All right, let's turn our attention here to a few other stories here. Space weather. This is an expert. This is from the LA Times. Space weather expert has ominous forecast. Mike Hapgood, who studies solar events, says the world isn't prepared for a truly damaging storm, and one could happen soon. All right, Amina Khan, Los Angeles Times. A stream of highly charged particles from the sun is headed straight towards Earth, threatening to plunge cities across the world into darkness and bring the global economy screeching to a halt. This isn't a premise of the latest doomsday thriller. Massive solar storms have happened before, and another one likely to occur soon, according to Mike Hapgood, a space weather scientist at the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory near Oxford, England. Much of the planet's electronic equipment, as well as orbiting satellites, have been built to withstand these periodic geomagnetic storms, but the world still is not prepared for a truly damaging solar storm. Hapgood argues in a recent commentary published in the journal Nature. Hapgood talked with the Times about the potential effects of such a storm and how the world should prepare for it. What exactly is a solar storm, he was asked? Well, I find that hard to answer. The term solar storm has crept into our usage, but nobody has defined what it means. Whether a solar storm is happening on the sun or is referring to the effect of on the earth depends on who's talking. I prefer space weather because it focuses our attention on the phenomena in space and travels from the sun to the earth. People often talk about solar flares and solar storms in the same breath. What's the difference? Solar flares mainly emit X-rays. We also get radio waves from these things, and the white light and the brightness of the flares. They all travel at the same speed of light, so it takes 8 minutes to arrive. There are some effects from flares, such as radio interference from radio bursts, but that's pretty small beer thing. The big thing is the geomagnetic storms on Earth that affect the power grid, and that's caused by the coronal mass ejections from the sun. Coronal mass ejections are caused from the magnetic field in the sun's atmosphere gets disrupted, and then the plasma, the sun's hot ionized gas, erupts and sends charged particles into space. Think of it like a hurricane. Is it headed towards us or not headed towards us? If we're lucky, it misses us. Well, you can see there's several more good questions here. So go ahead and check it out. Check it out. I'm going to continue on. Going from the heat of the sun, we go to the ACLU. Talking about tasers. Tasers are no longer a lethal alternative for law enforcement. Or no, a non-lethal, excuse me. Tasers subject the victims to 50,000 volt shock followed by 100 microsecond pulses of 1200 volts. Since 2001, more than 500 people in the United States have died after law enforcement officials have used this weapon against them. A study published this week by the American Heart Association's Circulation Journal confirms that the misuse of the taser can cause sudden cardiac arrest and death. In theory, a taser is intended to serve as a non-lethal method of control for law enforcement officers when they need to physically restrain a dangerous person. But as the new circulation study demonstrates, tasers cannot so simply be categorized as non-lethal. In addition, there are far too many instances in which officers have impulsively deployed tasers against children, pregnant women, and the mentally ill, even though the victims pose no real danger to either the officers or anyone. Well, this is a serious incident because officers out there who are not using their proper restraint are tasering people they shouldn't be tasering. Shouldn't be tasering a pregnant woman. Any officer that does that has momentarily lost their common sense. And hopefully these officers that are doing such activities will kind of regain their common sense, because that's not right. Something is terribly wrong out there. Alright, now part of the problem that's going on in the world is disinformation. It causes too much skepticism in the world. I'm going to hit the issue of skepticism momentarily. This comes to us from InfoWars, Paul Craig Roberts. Some readers have come across the erroneous conclusion that the Matrix consists of Republican Party disinformation, as if there is no disinformation on the left. Others think that propaganda is the business of Obama and the Democrats. In fact, propaganda from the right, the left, and the middle are all part of the disinformation fed to Americans. If I give some examples, the other day, Chuck Colson, one of Nixon's officials in prison for Watergate crimes, died. This gave NPR the opportunity to relive the Nixon horror. What precisely was the Nixon horror? Essentially, there was no such thing. Watergate was about President Nixon lying about what he learned about the Watergate burglary. When Nixon learned about the burglary, he did not act on it prior to his re-election because he reasoned rightly that the Washington Post would blame him for the burglary, although he had nothing to do with it, in the hopes of preventing his re-election. By going along with the cover-up, Nixon enabled the Washington Post to make an issue of the precise date on which Nixon learned of the burglary. White House tapes indicated that Nixon had learned of the burglary before he said he learned of it, so Nixon had permitted a cover-up and had to go. But what was the real reason? What was the Watergate burglary? We don't really know. A group of men, including former CIA operatives, were hired by the committee to re-elect the president to break into a Democratic campaign office in the Watergate complex. We don't know the purpose of the burglary, Some claim it was to wiretap the telephone in the belief that the Democratic Party was getting re-election money from communists in Cuba or elsewhere. Others claim that the burglars were looking for a list of call girls that compromised a White House official, as his fiancée was allegedly one of the call girls. Looking back from our time during which the Bush and Obama have deep sixed the U.S. Constitution, violated numerous U.S. and international laws, and behave as if they were Caesars, unconstrained by any law or morality, Nixon's crimes appear to be so trivial to be unremarkable. Yet Nixon is driven from office and is regarded as a criminal. What about Watergate? What was Watergate really about? Well, there's a long article here. I'm not going to read this, but it gets into the idea of what's going on in the world is not really what you're told. See, the mainstream media, the media itself, is supposed to go out and report to you what is happening. They used to be a checks and balances of sorts for the people, and they would be on the side of the people, so it seemed. But that's not really the case. When you look back to the history of the media, you see that the media was put in place to disinform people, to be a propaganda arm. If you go and you study the history of the media, you'll find the Council on Foreign Relations. You'll understand that media was set up to make sure that people didn't know what was going on, that the leaders who were out there behind the scenes could put their stories out. So all of this has caused a tremendous amount of skepticism because people don't know what to believe. Now, skeptics, isn't it time that you put your skepticism aside? We're in an important period of time. 2012, time a lot of people have talked about big changes going on. There's our big changes going in the world. And then I talk to people. I talked to someone this weekend. They told me they're very skeptical, that that's just their nature. And the things that I described to them, they should be able to put together, like clues. 1 + 1 = 2, plus another one = 3. Yet they weren't getting it. All they could keep saying was they were skeptical. They were skeptical. And that seems to be the same conversation I have with anybody that's skeptical. And they keep talking, and they don't have any information, and they refuse to hear any. Skepticism is a fatal flaw that is no longer working. You got to let go of the skepticism out there, whoever's still holding on to it, because that's going to be a detriment. Right now, we have 7 months. 7 months to go to the end of this year? 8 months, 7, 8. So, 2012, it's a year of great change. With all of the signs that you're seeing going on out there, it only indicates that there's something big about to go down within the course of this year, within the time frames that are set out. So it's time to pay attention. Time to put that skepticism aside. Time to realize that there's major problems in the world, and they're much bigger than what the media is telling you. And if at this day and age, if you still listen to the mainstream media, and something in your life is not right because you're not being informed, it's your own fault. You know, it's kind of laughable. America has that phrase, fool me once, fool me twice. You know how many times most Americans have been fooled? Over and over and over again. So isn't it time to stop being fooled? You've been fooled enough. Now it's time to not be fooled. Put the shoe on the other foot and fool them by getting smart, by opening your eyes and waking up. And that's what's happening in the country. That's why you see things going on with Ron Paul, because people are taking action. For a long while, people were apathetic. They sat back, did nothing. That's why things have happened. People step up, changes happen. Now here's an issue. This is Fukushima pool. This is from a senator, United States Senator. Fukushima fuel pool is national security issue for America. After visiting Fukushima, Senator Ron Wyden warned that the situation was worse than reported and urged Japan to accept international help to stabilize dangerous spent fuel pools. An international coalition of nuclear scientists and nonprofit groups are calling for the UN to coordinate a multinational effort to stabilize the fuel pools. Fuel pool number 4 is indeed the top of the short threat facing humanity. Anti-nuclear physician Dr. Helen Caldet says that the fuel pool, if fuel pool 4 collapses, she will evacuate her family from Boston and move to the southern hemisphere. There is an essentially dramatic statement given that the West Coast is much more directly in the path of Fukushima radiation than the East Coast. And then there's more here from nuclear expert Arnie Gunderson. Said there's more cesium in that unit fuel pool than all of the 800 nuclear bombs exploded above ground. But of course, it would happen all at once. It would certainly destroy Japan as a functioning country. Move south of the equator if that ever happened. I think that's probably the lesson there. So there's a lot more going on. It's kind of ridiculous that here it is, well over a year since the event took place out there in Fukushima, and finally they're saying, hey, maybe we should send some UN, maybe we should send someone to look at this. Sad that it's taken so long, but at least something is being looked at right now. All right. The U.S. military wants to microchip troops. DARPA is at it again. This time, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, otherwise known as DARPA, has announced plans to create nanochips for monitoring troops' health on the battlefield. Kate Nobbs at Mobile Dia reports sensors are targeted at preventing illnesses and disease, the two causes of most troops' medical evacuations. What seems like a simple way of cutting costs and increasing efficiency for some people concerned that this is the first step in a computer chip for all scenario. So here's read that article. Again, very important. All right. Dutch Sense now here has a weather report. Some severe weather that's going on. Let's listen here. Make sure you stay safe if you're in these areas where weather's going crazy.
Blesse mon cœur d'une langueur monotone. Je répète, blesse mon cœur d'une langueur monotone.
Hey everybody, Dutch Sense here, 4:02 a.m. Central Time on Monday, May 7th, 2012. And I'm just going to put this out really quick before I put out the Heartbreak forecast. I just processed that up. I'm going to upload that next. But I wanted to get this out to you guys right now. I realize there's a lot of frequency going on here in the storm, but I wanted to show you what's going on overall. Let's turn on Titan Storm Tracking and National Weather Service alerts. Now, National Weather Service only has one little spot down here north of Little Rock marked as a severe thunderstorm warning. However, when you take a look at the color key down here in the lower left, you can clearly see going from Michigan through Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, going down through western Kentucky, western Tennessee, even extending down into Mississippi and Alabama, a huge line of storms. And the color key tells it, bright pink at the center, white at the center. The computer's detecting hail throughout the entire storm. It's pressing east-northeast. So, if you live anywhere in the line of these storms, folks, right now, like I said, it's currently over Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, going down into Arkansas, over into Tennessee and Kentucky. Well, it's going to press east-northeast. So that means pretty much the entire states of Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, even over here on the East Coast, Pennsylvania, New York, okay? It's pretty intense, and it's going to flare up. It's not going to die out, I don't think. Also, behind that, another line is breaking out down here into New Mexico, Colorado. There's still snow going on up in the mountains, even coming down to lower elevations here. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Let it rumble for a second there. Wow, okay. So we've got really intense storms going on, and then look up here in Canada as well. Very intense storms mixed with sleet and snow. That's just the weirdest thing, but that's going on up there. And, of course, we've got intense cells down here in Texas heading through Louisiana. Luckily, that's staying below any kind of severe level. It's just one strong cell here just north of Austin. Now, that probably will flare up, too, as it presses east-northeast. Overall, it's going to be pretty rough couple days here, and we've got another storm coming in on the west coast, and it's going to press right up over the northern states again. So that means all these northern states that we just saw get hit a couple days ago are most likely going to see it right down in here over the next 3 days. And then you guys need to watch the coming Heartbreak forecast after this, because we're going to cover all the areas in the Midwest that are being hit right now with intense frequency. And I mean, there's just all types of sawtooth sweeps, scalar squares going on in here, and what I call Heartbreak's circle sweeps. And what they're doing, I believe, is heating up the atmosphere and ionosphere and thus causing additional storms in a couple days. Okay, so you can just see everything that's going on. It's a really intense line of storms, folks. Hang in there. And if you get any confirmation stories on this, there's reports of tornado sirens going off in Illinois already. But, of course, the National Weather Service doesn't have any marks, so I guess that's a local emergency manager's decision to turn that on. But it indicates that the storms are very severe and not anything to play around with. If you get a warning for your area, take heed of it, obviously. We're coming on rush hour time, so there'll be a lot of people in traffic at a lot of these major cities here in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, and that's just 2 hours away. So get the word out and let anybody you know that lives in these areas, or if you live in these areas, be aware, okay?
Okay, so yes, be safe if you're in those areas there. All right, one last story, then we jump into our prayer and meditation for today. This comes from the National Geographic Daily News. Record 9 planet solar system discovered. Alien star likely has more planets than the sun, astronomers say. A star about 127 light years from Earth may have even more planets than the sun, which would make the planetary system the most populated yet found. According to a new study, HD 10180, a sunshine star in the southern constellation Hydrus, may have as many as 9 orbiting planets, besting the 8 official planets in our solar system. The star first made headlines in 2010 with the announcement of 5 confirmed planets and 2 more planetary candidates. Now, reanalysis of nearly a decade's worth of data not only confirmed the existence of the 2 possible planets, but also uncovered the telltale signals of 2 additional planets possibly circling the star, bringing the total to 9. So the more that science goes out there and looks in the universe, the more that they realize what has been told for a long time, that there is lots of life out there. And eventually, humankind will get an opportunity to experience that. Earthlings will experience. All right. Let's jump into our meditation for today. Go ahead and close your eyes. Relax. All right, for the beginning of this week meditation, let us imagine. Let's imagine that we are walking down a path. And as we're walking down the path of life, let's just think back to this past weekend. Let's think back to the light of the moon that was shining and contemplate how the moon, which represents our unconscious mind, as it shines bright and full, tells us that unconsciously there is a light inside wanting to shine brightly. And all we have to do is focus and allow that light to shine out. And we take inspiration from the moon to allow that light within to shine, to allow the unconscious illumination to guide our way. And as we walk contemplating the unconscious illumination, we are also aware of the sun, the conscious mind, and the illumination provided from this ball of light. And between the light of the sun and the light of the moon, illumination is brought to us during the day and the night. And we find that light is ever available. And as we understand this light, we realize that light is information. And as we allow this light to shine through us out into the world, we process the information and we realize that there's more to the light than just the brightness. that we grow and we learn as we experience the light, that we shine bright like the light. Let's make sure all of our chakras are activated, starting with the one at the bottom of the spine. The color is red. Raise the energy up to the next chakra above it. Imagine the color orange right at the belly button, and then raise the energy up to the chakra above it, just below the rib cage. Imagine the color yellow. From there up to the heart chakra, imagine the color green. From the green heart chakra up to the throat, imagine the color blue. From the blue throat chakra, go up to the third eye, imagine the color violet. Now up to the crown chakra, the top of the head. Imagine the color indigo, and then the light continues on into the cosmos and becomes bright white. And you are connected above and below to the earth and to the cosmos. Take a moment to honor all of the connections to all that ever was, all that ever will be, and all that is. Know that you are part of all things, and your purpose here on this earth is much more than you realize. There is a purpose for everything, and as you focus and contemplate your purpose, you will understand more and more what this journey is about, why you are here, and where we are headed. Now let's just think a good thought for everybody in the world. Send out love all around the planet to everybody around the world, friends and enemies alike. And sometimes those that are the enemies need to go to the top of the prayer list because they need the most love. Let's bring our energy and attention back to the present moment on the count of 3. 3, coming back to the present moment filled with confidence. 2, coming back to the present moment filled with faith. And 1, coming back to the present moment happy, healthy, and whole. Happy, healthy, and whole. And there you have it. That is our show. That is our prayer. That is our meditation. Thanks for being here, friends. It's always a pleasure. Welcome back to the week. And let's have a great week. I'll be back tomorrow with more news information. Be safe. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. I'm out of here.